Welcome back, class. I want to take this lecture to introduce you to some of the basic ideas, sort of the core concepts that unite Hinduism. And this will help you especially with regards to your reading from the Gita. It'll help you to understand not necessarily what's going on as far as the plot of the storyline, but it'll help you understand the ideas that the Gita is trying to clarify, that the Gita is trying to teach you, and just give you some context of Hinduism in general to help with your reading. So, Hinduism begins with a deceptively simple question. And that question is, what do you want? What do you want out of life? What is the thing that drives you? What makes you get out of bed in the morning? What is that goal that you have? I want my life to be like this, or I want this to be a particular part of my life. Is it your family? Is it your job? Your career? Is it money? Is it wealth? Is it pleasure? This correlates to a question that arises in the West with the Greek philosophical tradition. How should I live my life? In what manner should I live my life? How should I conduct myself? And Hinduism gives an interesting answer to this due to its inclusiveness. And Hinduism's inclusivity is going to be one of its most distinctive factors, especially with regard, if we do sort of like a comparative religion. Hinduism's inclusivity is going to be what makes it stand out, what makes it unique, especially if we compare it to the Western monotheistic religions. Because I say it's inclusive and its inclusivity due to how it answers this question. Because if I asked you, this is an online class, but if I called you up and I said, hey, this is Professor G, I want you to answer me this one question. What do you want most out of life? What do you want out of life? I would probably, so on any given semester, there's probably about 100, 150 of you. I would probably get about 100 to 150 different answers to this question because you all want different things. You all have different objectives and different goals for your life. No one individual is probably going to give the exact same answer as another. In Hinduism, I say it's inclusive because it accounts for the wide range of beliefs, the wide range of wants and desires of people. But it sort of breaks this question, the answer to this question, down into two different paths. And these paths are the paths that people lead in their lives, the different sorts of lives that people live. Hinduism said there's two general broad categories, two general ways that people live their lives. The first is the path of desire. So if I asked you what you want and you said, I just want to have a good time, that would be the path of desire. The path that seeks out pleasure. The path that seeks out wealth, fame, fortune, sensual pleasures, that seeks out maybe relationships, maybe just flings, maybe one-night stands, maybe getting the best high, whatever it is, this falls under the path of desire. But it's not just pure hedonism, right? Hedonism just being the pursuit of pleasure. The path of desire also includes things like having a fulfilling career. The desire to have a good, well-paying job is part of the path of desire. Desire to have a good family. Perhaps your goal in life is to have a family and to raise good children. That would be part of the path of desire. We'll talk about why exactly here in a second. The second path, the path of renunciation. This is we can kind of call this the religious path, right? You see people spending their free time working with underprivileged people donating large sums of money to charity, perhaps some people giving up their job, giving up any hopes of one day having a family, and just dedicating their entire lives to helping others. This would be the path of renunciation, the path of perhaps you want to, maybe some of you, one of you wants to be a pastor, wants to be even a teacher or a preacher, this is considered to be the path of renunciation. Right? You're giving up certain aspects of the path of desire, wealth, a family, perhaps to be famous, whatever it is. But these two paths are distinct. And Hinduism says that different people want and follow different paths. And so it tries to appeal to all of those people, not just some. And this is when I say it's inclusive, because it's inclusive of everybody's wants and desires, right? You can be seeking a good career and a good life for your family, following the path of desire, and still be a Hindu. But there's a catch to this. And the catch is that this is sort of like a ladder, in a sense. One path leads to the other. One path leads to the other. That the path of desire will eventually lead to the path of renunciation. Now, when I say eventually, I don't mean, well, I could mean this, but I don't just mean this. I don't just mean somebody who perhaps spends his or her 20s and 30s seeking after a good career, and they finally get the career in their 50s. They're like, well, I mean, is this everything? It's not that fulfilling. It's not what I thought it would be. And so then maybe they take up religion, or maybe they take up some other sort of hobby, or maybe they seek to answer some of these basic questions of life. According to Hinduism, when we start talking about this idea of reincarnation, right? Sometimes people spend their entire lives on this path of desire. Sometimes people spend their entire lives searching after that good career. Sometimes people spend their entire lives building that good family. And sometimes in that life, they find fulfillment in that thing. Sometimes people are content with just having a good family, and that's it. Sometimes people are content with having a good career, and that's it. They don't think about what life's really about. Perhaps in this life, they never will ask these sorts of questions. And so according to Hinduism, this is kind of where religion begins, is in the path of renunciation. Religion begins here. Religion enters the fray here. Because a person that's pursuing the path of desire is never going to start to ask these basic fundamental questions. Who am I? Why am I here? What's going to happen when I die? Right? Some people, and this is not meant in any derogative way, but maybe you don't really ask those questions. Maybe you're like, well, that's just like religious stuff. I'm not really into that, right? Hinduism says, and Hinduism accounts for this, right? Some people will never ask those questions in this life, or in the next life, or maybe even hundreds of thousands of lives. Sometimes it's not going to click, but at some point in time, says Hinduism, it will click. At some point in time, you're going to come to a point in which you say, maybe there is something else. Maybe I should start to ask these basic questions. Maybe this is brought about by a horrific event. Maybe it's brought about by some sort of tragedy, the loss of a loved one, the loss of a job, the loss of a career. Maybe it's brought about by depression, by some sort of childhood trauma. Whatever it is, says Hinduism, at some point in your long list of reincarnated lives, it's going to hit you. This basic question: who am I really? Why am I here? And what's going to happen when I die? And once that hits, then you go on to the path of renunciation, the path of religion. But even along the path of renunciation, there are several different stages. I mentioned when I brought up renunciation that renunciation begins perhaps with service, the service of others, putting others before yourself. But that's one of the lower paths of renunciation, right? You can live the whole life devoting yourself to other people and still not start to ask these basic questions. It's when you start to ask this basic question, who am I? What am I? Why am I here? That you get on the path of moksha, the path of enlightenment, the path of release, which we'll get to. Okay, so we're going to be reading in this class, we're going to be reading selections from the Gita, the Bhagavad Gita, which is perhaps one of the most famous of the Hindu texts. But Hindu scriptures in general, there are two major scriptures. The first is the Vedas, the Vedas being the first and earliest of the Hindu scriptures. And the Vedas is a huge collection of different, it's not just one scripture, we have different categories. The Vedas cover everything from temple ritual, like what you were supposed to do while you're at the temple, what sort of sacrifices you were supposed to make, how the temple was supposed to look, how you're supposed to dress, all this other good stuff. And the more philosophical aspect of the Vedas, the Upanishads dealing with these sort of heady topics that we'll get into, topics like Brahma and Atma, sort of building Hindu cosmology, the Hindu universe, how it understood the world, is through Upanishads. We're reading selections from the Bhagavad Gita, which is the story of Arjuna, his sort of search for enlightenment, his path to enlightenment, his conversations with Krishna. You'll be reading the first couple of selections from that. That's a part of a larger work, the Mahabharata. Sorry, I'll be completely honest with you. I've probably tried to pronounce this word to myself in my office like 100 different times. I'm probably not going to get it right, probably never will get it right. So excuse my mispronunciation. I work hard at this. I ask people who speak the language, how do you pronounce this? And some of these words, Mahabharata, I'll probably never get it right. But the Bhagavad Gita is a section, it's a part of this larger work. Now, when I bring up the Hindu scriptures, there's another difference here between East and West. The Western monotheistic traditions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, if I asked you what's the primary text of Judaism, what is Judaism based on, you would say the Torah, or perhaps the Hebrew Bible. If I asked you what Christianity is based on, probably the go-to response would be the Gospels. If I asked you what Islam is based on, you'd say the Quran. No, that's right. Though the Western tradition build from their holy text. Christianity is rooted and based in the Gospels. And the Gospels are considered the Word of God, or God-breathed. The Quran is literally the Word of God, the words that God spoke to Muhammad through Gabriel. They're literally the Word of God. There's no middleman there except Gabriel. But we'll talk about that when we talk about Islam. But the Hindu scriptures don't carry the same sort of weight that they do in the West. This goes back to the inclusivity of Hinduism. Hinduism incorporates a lot of different religious traditions. So some Hindus really only read the Vedas, and they consider the Gita sort of secondary, kind of a side type thing. Contrary-wise, some Hindus focus almost exclusively on the Gita. The Gita plays a very profound cultural role in Hinduism and in India. They make movies about it constantly. There's TV shows about it constantly. It's probably one of the most popular holy texts. But that's not to say that these are somehow pivotal to Hinduism. I mean, this might be a little tricky to understand, right? But if you talk to a Muslim and you say, do you read the Quran or do you believe the Quran? They're going to say, of course we do. Not to say that Hindus don't read the Gita, but Islam and the Quran go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. You're not going to ever find a Muslim who says, the Quran, I don't know, whatever. Okay? The Quran is the building block of Islam. That being said, these Hindu scriptures, while they form the core of certain Hindu communities, they're not the Word of God. They're God-inspired, sure. So a lot of Hindus would say that. But it's not like, there's no like proof text that you get in Western religions. Like, oh, you're a Christian. Well, you must know John 3:16. Or oh, you're Jews, so you have to follow these certain religious rules and regulations. There's not that aspect. Hinduism isn't a law-based religion. It doesn't say you have to eat this, see this verse, like Judaism and Islam, if that makes sense. So let's move into some of the main concepts of Hinduism, the general ideas that sort of, lights are out, still here, the sort of ideas that make Hinduism what it is. And the first of these ideas, I have to be honest here, this idea of monism is not a Hindu concept. Monism is a philosophical term. It's taken from Western philosophy. But I think it fits Hinduism as a whole. And if you're Hindu, please correct me if I'm wrong, if you're watching this. But monism, in the West, we make this basic distinction between the spiritual world and the physical world. The spiritual world and the physical world. There's no overlap between the two. Well, there is overlap in the sense that God might intervene in the physical world. But the two are very different. They're distinct. So we can represent it as two different worlds, right? The physical world or the material world and the spiritual world. They're two distinct planes of existence. And monism kind of erases this distinction between the physical and the spiritual. According to monism, the physical and the spiritual are one and the same, that there's no distinction between the physical world and the spiritual world. Specifically, monism says that all of reality is comprised of one substance. All of reality is the same, is composed of, is built of the same thing. Everything from our physical world, from this whiteboard to myself to God, is composed of the same substance. That's monism. Okay? But we're going to get a very similar idea in Hinduism when we talk about Brahma. In Hinduism, Brahma is the one unchanging ultimate reality. Brahma is all there is, and everything is composed of Brahma. Brahma is God. Now, when I introduce that word God, there's probably some strange stuff going on in your head, because in the West we think of God differently than this. Okay? And this is mainly due to the Western doctrine of creation. God creates the world. The book of Genesis. This is shared by Jews, Christians, and Muslims. Right? The idea that you have God that exists somewhere out there. By out there, I mean somewhere outside of the world. God creates the world. He brings the universe. He brings reality into existence. But he's separate from the world. He exists independently of the world. Right? He's before the world. He's what brings it into existence. He doesn't depend on the world. By creating the world doesn't somehow make God greater. Doesn't add anything to God. And likewise, if we take the world away, God's still there. God's still doing God stuff wherever God is. Right? This is how we think about it in the West. Hinduism doesn't make that distinction. In Hinduism, messing up my. In Hinduism, God. I'm not saying that God and the world are the same thing. I'm saying that everything that is, everything that exists, whether it's you, whether it's me, whether it's this whiteboard, whether it's the sun, whether it's the earth itself, everything that is Brahma. Everything, the entirety of the universe is composed at a basic, fundamental level of Brahma. It is Brahma. Right? So Brahma is God, yes. but Brahma is also ultimate reality. Brahma is the sum of reality, and everything that exists in reality contains some aspect, whatever that means, contains some aspect or contains some element of Brahma. Now, also in Hinduism, you have this concept of the soul, but it's different from the Western concept of the soul. So I say that everything is Brahma, everything is within Brahma, everything contains Brahma. And I said that you and I contain Brahma. The Brahma in you, the Brahma in me is called Atma. Atma, so this is you. You're existing in the God, world, Brahma universe. You have Brahma. Brahma is in you. Brahma is in me. And this corresponds to the Hindu concept of soul, which is referred to as Atma. Now, I say it's different, right? Because in the West, if I say that I believe I have a soul and I believe my soul survives death, what do you think? Most people say, well, my soul survives death and I go to heaven or I go to the afterlife. And my soul's there with my family's soul, maybe Fido's soul, my dog's soul's there too. Right? We have this sort of idea that heaven's like this picnic in the sky, right? Where we reunite with all of our loved ones and our lost pets, and we just have this nice meal together. Well, Atma corresponds to the concept of the soul insofar as Atma is eternal. It doesn't die with our physical bodies. It continues on after death, but there's no sense of personality, right? Me, Michael Granado, history instructor at Savannah Tech, isn't going to survive death, but my soul will. Atma will. I'm not going to retain like my memories, my experiences in this life. It's not like I get like more and more memories as Atma progresses. But Atma survives. It keeps on. It isn't destroyed because Atma again is part of Brahma. And Brahma, individually manifested in you, is Atma. If that makes sense. If it doesn't, shoot me an email, stop by my office, we'll talk about it. All right. So everything is Brahma. Also within Hinduism, now this fourth point, all of this sort of corresponds together. All of it sort of rolls together, so bear with me here. So I'm going to introduce the concept, and this will be found in your readings from the Gita, the concept of Dharma, Yoga, Maya, reincarnation, and moksha. Now in the West, we view time and the passage of time as linear. Right? I even do this in my first lecture video. I lay out the arrow of time, right? And in the West, we measure time by the birth of Christ. Everything before Christ is BC, everything after Christ is AD, right? But time is linear. And we think about this when we think about like the beginning of the world, right? The world has a beginning, and eventually the world will end, right? You can talk about this in the religious context. Christians talk about the rapture. Muslims talk about the rapture, the end of time, the universal caliph, all this stuff. Or you can think about it scientifically as well. The world will one day be destroyed by the sun. And also scientifically, the universe, as we know it, will one day come to an end. Right? There's a beginning of the universe and there's an end. In the Eastern traditions, in Hinduism, time isn't linear. It isn't progressing one way. There's no past and present in a certain sense. What I mean by that, time in Hinduism is cyclical. It moves in a great cosmic circle. That us as individuals are constantly in this process of birth, life, death, reincarnation. That we're constantly, and this is constantly in the cycle of reincarnation. We're born, we die, we're reincarnated over and over and over to an unimaginable extent. You cannot fathom how long your Atma has existed, because it's always existed. It's constantly in this cycle of reincarnation. But not just us, everything. Brahma is this cycle. The universe, the physical universe, the world as we know it, the stuff of reality, matter, is in this cycle as well. The universe as we know it will one day come to an end. Yes, says Hinduism, but it will be reborn. The universe itself, physical reality, will be reincarnated, just like you, the individual Atma, will also be reincarnated after the death of your physical body. Follow me? Maybe. Okay. Stick with me. We're almost there. Okay, so you have this cycle of reincarnation. So, you're born, you live your life. Maybe you're kind of a good person. Maybe you give to the poor. Maybe you piss some people off at some point in your life. But in general, you're a good person. This is where this idea, well, all of these ideas are connected together. Oh, I even forgot to put it up there. This is where the idea of karma comes into play. Each person lives their own particular life, like we talked about. What do you want out of life, right? Each person is born to do a certain thing. In my lecture on Indian history, we'll talk about the caste system. People are born into different societal roles. You have a place to play. You have a role to play in society. Are you going to be a cook? You're going to be a police officer. You're going to be a teacher. What are you doing in society? That question, what is your role, how you should be acting, what you should be doing in society as a whole, is referred to as dharma. Dharma. Specific caste, the warrior caste, the priestly caste, have specific dharma. Priests are there to take care of the temple and the gods and to minister to the people. That's their dharma. You have a particular dharma. Right now you're a student. Your dharma is to be a good student. That makes sense. Right? Suppose you go into business, your dharma is to be a good businessman. Okay? Or businesswoman. Whatever it is. How well you do that, how well you perform your duties as a student, we'll say, just because it's pertinent to us, how well you study, whether you're slacking off right now, whether you're going to go like on a Netflix binge after this, right? That would be being a bad student. That wouldn't be fulfilling your dharma as a student, and as a result, you would start to accumulate bad karma, right? Karma is sort of something that it sticks to your Atma, right? So if we're going back to this notion of a soul, and this will represent your soul that's traveling along the path of reincarnation, right? This is you on the path of reincarnation. This is your soul, not your physical body. So karma, it sticks to your Atma. Good karma is going to ensure that you're reincarnated into a higher caste, or you stay as a human being. But bad karma, metaphorically, bad karma starts to weigh you down. Right? It starts to bring you down. This cycle of reincarnation. And by bring you down, I mean once you start to accumulate bad karma, you get stuck further and further into Maya. Maya is illusion. It means illusion. It's like magic. It's unreal. All right, and hopefully this will all start to tie together. But so Maya this cycle of Maya is this cycle of the material world and being attached to and stuck to and interested in the material world. So going back to this idea of these different paths, where you have the path of desire and the path of renunciation, there's nothing wrong, there's nothing ethically wrong with the path of desire. There's nothing morally wrong with wanting to have a good family. But wanting to have a good family gets you further and further bogged down into Maya. Being concerned with what school your child's going to go to, being concerned with your relationship to your wife isn't a bad thing, but it's getting you more and more focused on the physical world. It's getting you the bills, the day-to-day life, the maintenance of your car, your schoolwork is just getting you further and further bogged down into Maya, further, more and more attached to stuff and to things and to people. Oh, we're out again. So, and that's considered an illusion. It's not real because it's distracting you from this. It's distracting you from what's truly real. What's truly real is the Brahma within you. And a life spent seeking after desire, a life spent within the confines of Maya, isn't going to allow you to get in touch with Brahma. And because you're not in touch with Brahma, you're stuck in this cycle of birth and death. And that is undesirable because, in case you don't know this, life kind of sucks. Right? Paying bills isn't fun. Working a 9 to 5, coming home, cleaning your house, taking care of your kids isn't exciting. Woo, this is great. Right? Losing your loved ones, losing your dog, losing your job, experiencing trauma, experiencing the violence and the shit that comes along with life. No one wants that. At least not over and over and over again. Right? If you ever seen the movie Groundhog's Day, this is a good comparison here. Right? He's stuck experiencing the same day over and over again. Sure, there's some momentary pleasure. Sure, there's some momentary escape through music and through drink or through women or men or whatever. But at the end of the day, the shittiness of life sort of outweighs those momentary experiences of pleasure, at least for most people, right? At least for most people. Maybe you have a really good life and you can't relate to any of this. If so, good on you. But if you're the rest of us who sort of experience the day-in drudgery of life, right? It's not ideal. What's ideal for Hinduism is moksha, is release. And how you go about doing this, how you go about fulfilling your dharma, your duty, in order to gain good karma is through yoga. Now, yoga, when I say yoga, you probably think of girls in yoga pants going to the mall, rolling out their mats and doing these classes, right? That's not what yoga, that is one aspect of yoga. So we have different paths in life. People are vastly different. Yoga is the means by which you experience, you get into touch with your Atma. Yoga is sort of the method that you use. And there's a whole bunch of different types of yoga for a whole bunch of different types of people. For some people, it is that physical exercise, the physical exercise of yoga that you see people doing. It's supposed to get you in touch through physical exercise to get you in touch with Atma. But yoga for other people is meditation. Yoga for some is learning, is knowledge, whatever it is. So you have, in this cycle of reincarnation, you have a particular dharma to fulfill, a particular purpose to fulfill, and in this purpose, in this process, you use yoga, a method to get in touch with Atma. You want to get in touch with Atma because you want to get out of Maya. You want to get out of this illusion. You want to get in touch with what's most real. And when you do that, when you finally get to that point where you realize that you are Atma and that you're returning to Brahma, you experience moksha. And moksha is a break in the cycle. It ends the cycle of reincarnation, and you return to Brahma. The Atma, the soul, is no longer reincarnated. The soul returns and becomes one again with Brahma. All right, guys, I hope that helped. If not, email me, come by, we'll talk about it, and I'll see you next week.